The wind howled like a wounded animal through the snow-covered trees, tearing at Daniel's coat and stinging his face with ice. Every crunch of his boots against the frozen forest floor echoed in the emptiness. He had been hiking alone for 6 days, deeper into Montana's wilderness than most would dare to tread, past the boundaries of mapped trails, past even his own intention. He hadn't come here to survive anything. He'd come here to disappear. Daniel Hart used to be someone, used to matter. A decorated wildlife medic, respected in his field, once known for his daring animal rescues across state lines. But after the car crash that stole his wife 2 years ago, while he was working a rescue, no less, something in him fractured. Guilt had become his closest companion. Today, like every day since, he wandered with no real destination, hoping maybe the snow would wash away the parts of himself he couldn't forget. That's when he heard it. A sound no one expects to hear this deep in the backcountry. A low, guttural scream, soaked in agony. Not human, not entirely animal either. It rang out again, closer this time, desperate, repeating. Daniel froze. That was a bear, a female bear, and she was in distress. Logic told him to keep walking, stay alive. But instinct, and something deeper, buried in grief and duty, pulled him toward the sound. He moved quickly through the trees, his boots slipping over frozen rocks. As he climbed a ridge, his breath caught in his throat. Below, the snow was splattered red. Fresh blood, drag marks, claw gouges in the bark. He followed the crimson trail through thick evergreens until he saw her. A massive grizzly lay on her side near a toppled pine, flanks rising and falling in short, labored breaths. Her body trembled, half covered in snow. One paw twitched as if trying to move, but she couldn't rise. Her fur was soaked in blood near the hindquarters. Daniel stepped cautiously, heart hammering. She was enormous, at least 400 pounds, and clearly pregnant. Her belly heaved unnaturally, too low for her frame. Then their eyes met. He expected rage, panic, the primal flash of teeth, but her eyes, they weren't wild, they were pleading. It wasn't instinct anymore, it was empathy. He dropped his pack and knelt beside her. Every part of his training screamed at him. Don't touch her, don't get close, she's a ticking time bomb. But Daniel's hands moved on their own. He wrapped his scarf around her muzzle, not to muzzle her, but to offer scent familiarity. He spoke low, softly, not in words, just in tone. She growled once, deep and strained, then stopped. She let him near. With numb fingers, he pulled a foldable emergency tarp from his pack and quickly staked it between trees to form a lean-to shelter. Snow piled around them, the wind colder by the minute, but under the tarp it was barely manageable. She was already in labor. He saw it immediately. One cub was crowning, but the blood loss was heavy. Too heavy. Daniel used his fire starter to ignite a heat brick and slid it under a layer of his own clothing, creating a warm pouch near his chest. He sterilized a knife with alcohol, working as quickly as his frozen hands allowed. The bear let out a low cry as the first cub emerged. Tiny, barely breathing. Limp. No, no, no. Stay with me, Daniel muttered. He wrapped the cub in cloth and brought it to his chest, rubbing its fur, massaging its tiny body. He pulled a vial of adrenaline from his kit, one of the last he had, and gave the smallest possible injection near the cub's heart. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then, a wheeze, a twitch. The cub squeaked. Daniel exhaled a shaky breath, letting tears freeze on his cheeks. He looked back at the mother. She hadn't moved, but her massive paw slowly stretched forward and nudged the cub closer to him as if offering it to his care. For the first time since his wife's death, Daniel felt something bloom in his chest. Purpose. A reason. But it didn't last. The bear convulsed again. Another cub was coming. This one looked bigger. Its emergence strained the mother to her limits. She growled sharply, then fell silent, her eyes fluttering. Daniel sprang into action, preparing for the second birth. He wrapped the first cub in a scarf inside his coat and moved closer. Then the sound hit. A long, rising howl, chilling in its hunger. Another. Then 3 more. Wolves. Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned to the trees, his eyes scanning. Shadows moved just beyond the ridgeline. The scent of blood was thick in the air. It had drawn them. A starving pack, driven desperate by the storm. They would smell weakness, smell the cub, smell him. Daniel reached for his emergency flare. One left. One chance. The mother bear raised her head weakly. She saw them, too. Her muscles tensed, but she couldn't rise. He stood over her, gripping the flare tightly, his heartbeat pounding like a drum in his ears. The second cub was still coming. The first whimpered beneath his coat. Daniel struck the flare and hurled it into the dark with all the strength he had left. The shriek of ignition lit the snowblood forest in an angry red glow. Startled, the wolves scattered, their snarls replaced by high-pitched yelps as the light burst through the branches. He screamed, louder than he thought possible, raising his arms, making himself larger than life. "Go!" It worked. For a moment. The pack retreated, but not far. Daniel could feel their hunger clinging to the tree line like smoke. Eyes gleamed in the shadows. They were waiting, watching. He turned back to the mother bear. The second cub had just emerged, barely alive but breathing. Daniel quickly tucked it inside his coat beside its sibling, wrapping it in the same warmth, close to his chest. The bear groaned softly. She was losing strength fast. Blood soaked the snow beneath her, her body going still with exhaustion and trauma. She wouldn't survive another standoff. Neither would the cubs. Daniel's mind raced. He remembered something. A ranger station, old and abandoned, maybe 5 or 6 miles west. If it hadn't collapsed under snow, it might still offer shelter. But moving a full-grown bear through a blizzard, over knee-deep drifts and icy terrain? Insane. Impossible. Necessary. Daniel worked quickly. He yanked a sled tarp from his emergency kit, originally intended for supplies, and reinforced it with thick rope and branches to distribute the weight. With enormous effort, he slid the bear onto the makeshift stretcher. She didn't resist. Her head lolled weakly as he bound her gently in place. The cubs stayed nestled against his chest, their warmth the only fire he had left. Then came the hard part. Step by grueling step, he pulled. The sled groaned behind him, heavy with life and blood and trust. The wind sliced at his cheeks, and snow clung to his lashes like frost-bitten tears. The forest wasn't quiet. It was listening. Hours blurred. The cold chewed at his muscles and sweat froze against his back. But he couldn't stop. Not here, not now. He kept thinking about those eyes, the way the bear had looked at him, trusted him, like she'd known he wouldn't leave her behind. Then he saw it, a flash of movement. A wolf, just one, lean, gray, and patient. It wasn't attacking, it was tracking, waiting for Daniel to fail. He turned and lit the last flare, holding it out like a weapon. The wolf paused, eyes narrowing. When it lunged, Daniel swung the flare with full force, connecting with the side of its face. A sharp yelp. Blood. The wolf bolted into the trees. Daniel didn't celebrate. He just kept moving, lungs burning, legs screaming with each pull. As the storm deepened and his strength ebbed, memories began to surface. Unbidden, unwanted. A hospital room, beeping monitors. His wife, pale and sweating, gripping his hand as doctors swarmed. He had saved hundreds of animals, but he couldn't save her. Complications. Sudden. Fatal. He'd stood frozen in that room as everything he loved slipped away. And now, here he was, dragging a dying mother through the snow, trying to do what he couldn't before. Save a life in time. The ranger station appeared like a ghost through the trees, tilted, half sunken in snow, but still standing. He reached the door and fell forward, his hands raw and bleeding. He couldn't go another step. Then, something incredible happened. The bear, bleeding, barely conscious, shifted. With a soft grunt, she lifted her head and pressed it against the cabin door. Once, twice. It creaked open. Daniel collapsed face first into the doorway. The tarp bumped behind him. And slowly, painfully, the bear dragged herself just enough to nudge him inside. Then she slumped beside him and didn't move again. He woke hours later, shivering. Night had fallen. Snow had sealed the cabin like a tomb, but inside there was still hope. Daniel rolled onto his side and saw the bear, breathing shallowly but alive. He forced himself up, fingers numb and cracked. He built a fire using splinters from a broken table and lit it with his last match. Smoke curled upward, and warmth returned to the air like a slow exhale. He checked the cubs. Both were alive, curled against his body, their tiny noses twitching. Using powdered goat milk substitute, something he always carried for emergencies, he fed them with a dropper. They sucked greedily, blind but hungry. Then, turning to the mother, he unpacked his herbs. Yarrow, pine sap, and fireweed. Forest medicine. He ground them together and applied them to her wounds, creating a makeshift poultice. Every few moments he looked into her eyes. She never once looked away. Later, as the fire crackled and snow howled against the windows, Daniel took out his old camera. He hadn't used it in over a year. But this moment, the cubs, the fire, the battered mother bear resting beside a man who once lost everything, this was something worth remembering. He pressed record. This is Daniel Hart, day, I don't even know, somewhere west of Red Pine Ridge. I found a mother bear, injured in labor. I helped her deliver 2 cubs. They're alive. She's hanging on. I don't know if we'll make it through the night, but if we do, maybe this story will matter to someone. His voice cracked, but he kept filming. The camera caught the firelight dancing over his frostbitten face. The cubs curled on his lap. The mother breathing in peace for the first time in hours. He set the camera down. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel let himself believe he might be doing something good again. But that belief shattered with a single discovery. Daniel stepped outside briefly to check the horizon. The snow had slowed, moonlight peeking through ragged clouds. Then he saw them, boot prints, fresh, deep, human, leading toward the cabin, and away. Someone had been here, watching, close enough to see the flare, close enough to see everything, and they hadn't made themselves known. Daniel's stomach dropped. He turned back toward the door, heart pounding. They weren't alone in the forest anymore.